So let us pay homage to the Buddha first before continue to take sermon for tonight. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Catunang bhikkhave saccanang ananubodha apativeda evamidang dighamadhanang sangsaritang sandhavitang mamanjeva tumhakancha. O monks, because of not understanding and because of not penetrating the Four Truths, you and I, for a very long time, already wandering in these cycles of birth and death. The most honorable Bhikkhu Sangha from all over the world, especially the members of GBC, the Global Buddhist Consecration, the most respected Dr. Harsadip, who invited me, and is also the organizing committee member of GBC, the Global Buddhist Congregation of India. Thank you very much for inviting me. And the respected Mrs. Samsuk and Mrs. Apinya. And I would like to take my time to convey my gratitude, especially to Mrs. Samsuk, who introduced me for this program. And thank you very much for the team of GBC who make this event is possible. Ladies and gentlemen, today it is my honor to give the Dhamma sermon in this very occasion. And before I continue my sermon, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Venerable Santacitto. I'm from Indonesia. I was getting ordination for the Samanera, for the novice, the Buddhist novice, from quite long ago, around 2000, the ends of the 2000. And after that, I went to Sri Lanka to continue my study, especially to take my BA, the Bachelor's of Arts, and also continue to pursue my Ph.D. And on 2013, I was admitted for the Ph.D. And 2015, I was getting the high ordinations for Upasambadamang as a bhikkhu. And until now, and at present, I'm living in one of the most beautiful beautiful monastery in Central Java. If you can search in Google, and then you just write Mendut Buddhist Monastery in Google, and then you will find some images of our temple. And I think Mrs. Samsuk, when he went to Indonesia, to Boyolali at that time, she also visited our temple, that Mendut temple. And now I'm also being entrusted by one of the Buddhist colleges in Indonesia, Kertarajasa Buddhist College, to be the head of that Kertarajasa Buddhist College until now, from 2017 until now. Ladies and gentlemen, in these very occasions, I'm going to discuss with all of you about one of the most important discourses of the Buddha, That is a Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first sermon of the Buddha on the Four Noble Truths. And why I take this discourse, this sermon, this topic as my sermon is because, as we all know, that yesterday, all the Buddhist peoples all over the world celebrate the Asalha ceremony, commemorating the first sermons of the Buddha, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So I think that even today is still the nuance of this sermon, this ceremony, this Asalha ceremony. And the second one, why I take this discourse, even though actually for several days, Mrs. Samsuk already sent me some videos about this GPC, and I found that some monks from Thailand and from India already talk about this Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. But in my understanding, this Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta is very important because this discourse containing the most important teachings of the Buddha, the core teachings of the Buddha, that is the Four Noble Truths. And when we are talking about the Four Noble Truths, I think that will never end because this is the most important teachings of him. And why this teaching, the Four Noble Truths that we can find in this Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta is the most important teachings of the Buddha? Because, as I mentioned earlier in the very beginnings of this sermon, the Buddha says, Chatulang bhikkhave satchanang ananubuddha apadiveda eva midang digamadanang sangsaritang sandhavitang mamanjeva tumhakancha. O monks, because of not understanding, because of not penetrating the four truths, Chatu Satcha, it means the Four Noble Truths, you and I, for a very long time, had been wandering in these very cycles of birth and death, facing various kinds of suffering. It means if we want to get rid of this very suffering, if we want to be freed from these cycles of birth and death, there is no other way except by understanding, by penetrating these Four Noble Truths. The truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the way, of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So this is the most important thing that all the Buddhist people need to understand without exception. Because when we have the faith in the Buddha, we have the faith in Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, and our aim of life is to get rid of this suffering, to attain liberation, to attain Nibbana. These Four Noble Truths must be understood, must be penetrated. And in fact, during 45 years, the Buddha preaching his teaching with the various kinds of points of Dhamma, various points of teachings. All the teachings of the Buddha for 45 years were taught by him in order to make the people understand the Four Noble Truths. So whether we talk about Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination, we are talking about meditations, the Samatha and Vipassana meditation, insight meditation, all what the Buddha taught were being taught by him in order to make the audience, the listeners, understand these Four Noble Truths. Therefore, once when the Buddha was being surrounded by his disciples, he said, Pube cahang bhikkhave ittarahica, dukkhanca panyapemi dukkha nirudanca. O monks, from early time until now, I propound only two things. The first is about dukkha, about suffering, and the second is about the cessation of suffering. It means when talking about these two things, suffering and the cessation of suffering, that means he was talking about the Four Noble Truths, about suffering, its causes, its cessation, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So therefore, these Four Noble Truths are very important for the Buddhists to understand. And in fact, we as the Buddhists are very fortunate. We are being the humans, and the Buddhists are very fortunate. Why? Because according to the Buddha, according to Lord Buddha, to be born as the human is something very difficult. The Buddha says, Dulabang manusa padilabang. To be born as the human being is a very rare chance. Because in these cycles of birth and death, we had been wandering in this very life, in the cycles of birth and death, uncountable times. And many times we get reborn in the suffered world, in the beta world, the hungry ghost, as an animal, as the hell beings. But to get a chance, to get opportunity to be born as a human being is very rare, very difficult to gain. So once the Buddha gave the simile, he took up the small gravel and put on his finger and asked his disciples, which one bigger, this small gravel in my hand, in my fingers, or the Mount Himalaya? Of course, his disciples said that the hugeness of the Himalaya mountain is uncomparable with the small gravel in the hands of the Buddha. And then the Buddha said, just like this small gravel in his hand, the beings who are reborn in the human state as the humans are very small in number, just like this gravel. But most of beings are being born in the hell as the animal, as the hungry ghost. So that means now we become human beings are very fortunate. But there is another things more difficult to gain, to appear in the world. That is the appearance of the Buddha in the world. That is more difficult. And now we as the Buddhists, besides we are being reborn as the human beings, and the second, we are living as a human when the Buddha was still existing. Even though now the Buddha has already passed away, as the physical already passed away, but as the qualities of the Buddha, now we still can feel, we still can listen, we still can learn the qualities of the Buddha. So that means we are now living in the times when the Buddha was existing, in the period when the Buddha was existing. And that is a real fortunate for us. For without any big meritorious deeds, it is impossible for us to be born as the humans and living as the human in the times when the Buddha was still existing. But beside that, there is another more difficult things than these two things. That is to have a chance, to have opportunity to listen to the teachings of the Buddha, to listen to the good teaching, to listen to the true teaching. That is more difficult. Dullabang saddhama savanang. To have a chance, to have opportunity to listen to the good teaching, to the teachings of the Buddha is even more difficult. And now, we are not just as a human beings, but we also have a chance, have an opportunity to listen to the Buddha's teaching, to the true teaching. What is the true teaching? The true teaching, the good teaching, is the doctrine which leads to the cessation of suffering, which leads to the realization of happiness, the highest happiness, nibbana, liberation. So that is none other than the Four Noble Truths. So we are very fortunate as the human being, as the Buddhist, human Buddhists. Very fortunate. And furthermore, if we look back, the life story of the Buddha, we can see, we can find that not long after the Buddha's enlightenment, actually in the Buddha's, his mind was at peace, not being delighted to preach his Dhamma, not interested to open his new discovery to the world. The reason, the Dhamma that has been realized by him, the teaching that had been realized by him, is very deep, difficult to be understood, difficult to be seen, and it is beyond reasoning, beyond logic, and only those who are really wise would understand his teaching. Whereas most of the people in the world at the time and even now are being immersed, being engulfed, being delighted, being addicted with sensual pleasures. And being immersed by the sensual pleasures is difficult to understand the Buddha's teaching. Therefore, the Buddha says, only those who are called as the Patisotagami, or those who are going against the stream of sensual pleasures, they will understand the Dhamma. But those who are living just for the sake of sensual pleasures, just following the sensual pleasures all the time, are very difficult to understand Dhamma, very difficult to understand the teachings of the Buddha. So because of that reason, the Buddha was at the time at peace, not being interested to teach his teaching. But then Brahma Sampati came to him and showed to the Buddha that even there are few people could understand the teaching. And these few people have little dust in their eyes. These few people have little defilements, little stains in their eyes. And these people would understand the teachings of the Buddha. Only then the Buddha, by his own divine eyes, through his divine eyes, and to see the 10,000 world system as to whether there are some people who could understand his teaching. And by himself, he saw that even few people will understand his teaching. And then he thought, who would be the first persons worthy of listening his teaching? Worthy of gaining the fruit of his teaching? And then it occurred in his mind, the Buddha's mind, the former two teachers, Alara Kalama and Udaka Ramabhuta. These two former teachers were actually ready. Their minds are capable to understand the teachings of the Buddha. Their minds are mature to understand the Four Noble Truths. But unfortunately, the deities informed the Buddha and said that these two teachers already passed away. One was passing away 1 day ago, another one passed away 7 days ago, 1 week ago. Very unfortunate. And they passed away in the Brahma world, especially the Arupa Brahma, which makes the Buddha impossible to teach his teaching. And then it came to the Buddha's minds, who would be the first person worthy to understand his teaching? And it occurred, the 5 ascetics. The 5 ascetics who already served him for 6 years in the Uruvela forest, where the Buddha, at the time as the Bodhisattva, as the ascetic Gautama, practicing self-mortification. Then the Buddha took a journey and went to the place where these 5 ascetics were staying. And at the time, it came to know that these 5 ascetics, that is Kondanya, Mahanama, Badia, Wapa, and Asaji, were staying in Isipatana in the deer bark in Varanasi at present. And the Buddha came to Varanasi, to Isipatana, to meet these 5 ascetics. So when these 5 ascetics saw the Buddha was coming from way, they agreed to each other, they talked to each other, they agreed not to serve the Buddha when the Buddha came. Because they thought that the Buddha was failed in searching the liberation after he left the practice of self-mortification. So they agreed to each other not to serve the Buddha. But then when the Buddha was closer and closer, due to the grace, the calmness, the serenity of the Buddha, these 5 ascetics could not help themselves not to serve the Buddha. One is welcoming the Buddha, another one is preparing the seat, another one is preparing the water to wash the hands and the feet of the Buddha. Then the Buddha started to teach to the 5 disciples. In the very beginning, they still didn't believe. They didn't believe if the Buddha already attained the full enlightenment. But then the Buddha assured that he had already found the way, he had already found the solution for getting rid of this mass of suffering to attain the liberation. And then, when these 5 ascetics had a trust, had a faith in the Buddha, and the Buddha started to teach his first discourse, one of the most important discourse in the Buddhist history. And in this discourse, in this Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, it is very interesting because in the very beginnings of the discourse, the Buddha point out the 2 things, the 2 practices that should be avoided by those who are living the home life and going to the homeless life. The 2 practices that should be avoided to those who seek for the liberation. The first, Kamasukhalikanu Yoga, the pursuit of sensual pleasures. And the second one, Attakilamatanu Yoga, the practice of self-mortification. And these 2 practices are necessary for the Buddha to show to these 5 ascetics, because the 5 ascetics still believe that the Buddha had been going back to the pursuit of sensual pleasures, had been going back to find the sensual pleasures. But here the Buddha said that these sensual pleasures, living for the sake of sensual pleasures, It's not the way how to get liberations. It's not the way how to attain the end of suffering. And this practice is Hino, Gamo, Potu Janiko, Anario, Anata Sanghito. The low practice, the vulgar, the common practice, the Potu Janiko, common practice. Why? Because, as we know, that most of the people in the world just pursuing the sensual pleasures. So it is a kind of common practice. And this pursuing of sensual pleasures are anario anata sanghito, ignoble and leading to the disadvantage. And even in many discourses, the Buddha said, Apasada kama bikawe bahu duko adinavo bhavabhiyo. O monks, these sensual pleasures is giving a very trifling happiness, and the suffering is even much, and much more is the danger that arises from these sensual pleasures. Why? Why? What is the reason why these sensual pleasures having much dangers? Because as we know, many various bad action, many unwholesome actions, many bad deeds are done, are practiced by many people just for the sake to get these sensual pleasures. And because of that reason, the sensual pleasures is giving much more dangers. And according to the law of karma and effect, to the law of karma, the cause and effect, to say that all our actions will give the result, the bad giving the suffering, the good giving the happiness. And these, because of sensual pleasures, many people do various kinds of evil, and that will lead them to the suffering, not only in this very life, even the life after death. So that's why these sensual pleasures are not the way how to get rid of suffering, not the way how to liberate ourselves from the suffering. And the second one is the Atakila Matanu Yoga, the practice of self-torture, the practice of self-mortification. And this practice is also not the way to attain liberation, not the way to find the solution, to get rid of the cycles of birth and death. And the Buddha said about this in order to make these five ascetics understand. Because at the time, these five ascetics hold a view that the only practice, the only teaching that leads for liberation is by practicing self-mortification, by practicing self-torture. And the Buddha stressed out here that this self-mortification, this self-torture is not the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So this should be given by the Buddha in order to make the view of these five ascetics becoming upright. And only then the Buddha said to these five ascetics that avoiding these two practices, the pursuit of sensual pleasures and the practice of self-mortifications, those who are leading the life for the sake of liberation need to practice what the Buddha said as the middle way, Majjhima Patipada. And this Majjhima Patipada is none other than the Noble Eightfold Path, consisting the right view, right intentions, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and the last one, right concentration. And this Majjhima Patipada is the only way how to get rid of this mass of suffering, not by pursuing the sensual pleasures. So neither pursuing the sensual pleasure nor by practicing the self-mortification, but by practicing, by developing this, the noble effort path. And only when these five ascetics becoming ready, when their minds are ready to accept the further discourse, the further teaching, to accept the most important teachings of the Buddha, then the Buddha gave his foremost teaching, Samukha Sinka Desana, the foremost teachings of him, that is the Four Noble Truths. So when these five ascetics minds already ready to accept the higher teaching, and then the Buddha gave the teaching, the Four Noble Truths, and he saw the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So, what is the truth of suffering? So, when we are talking about the truth of suffering, now many people have given translation with various translation: the pain, the suffering, the unsatisfactoriness. Of course, all these translations are not wrong, because some people who translate these have their reason to translate according to their understanding. But to understand fully the truth of suffering, the term dukkha, we have to understand in detail, we have to understand in comprehensive, we have to go deep within our mind, within our minds and body. In the very beginning, to understand the suffering, first we have to understand the dukkha. We understand the suffering, the phenomenon as suffering, as it is by nature suffering. And that is very common understanding of dukkha. Just like we are getting old is suffering, we are getting sick is suffering, and separation from those whom we loved is also suffering, and associating with those who actually not pleasing us is suffering. So this is a common suffering. But there is another step that we have to understand what suffering is. What we call as viparinama dukkha, suffering due to the impermanency, the changing. What are the changing thing? What the impermanency? This is our will of experience. Whatever things what we experience through our six organs, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body and our minds, all are in the state of ever changing. And this changing, this impermanency is what the Buddha said as suffering. So because of this impermanency is suffering, yata nicang tang dukkang, it means even the happiness, even the pleasant feeling, even the good things, because all those things, even the good things, the pleasant feeling or the happiness, are also belonging to the state of ever changing, or those also belonging to suffering. So we have to understand that this changing nature is what the Buddha said as suffering. Even the pleasant feeling is also suffering, because how much the good things that we have, that we possess, we cannot maintain as long as we want, as long as we wish. All the things, even what we possess, what we consider as a dear, all those things are in the state of changing. And because of the changing nature of this, so they are belonging to suffering, belonging to dukkha. And beside that, we have to understand ultimately at the end that all the conditioned things, be it the good things or the bad things, all the conditioned thing is suffering, sankhara dukkha. Why this conditioned thing is suffering? Because the nature of the conditioned thing, the nature of the conditioned phenomena are the burden. Whether we have the good things or we have the bad things, all these things are the burden. Just like if we have the two bags, one is full of the rubbish, another one is full of the precious gems, two bags. Even this bag is full of the precious gem. When it is being taken up, put on our shoulders, what happened? That is the burden. And because of that is burden, so that is suffering. All the conditioned thing is suffering. So these need to be understood. And the Buddha not only taught about this suffering, because some people, when just begin to study Buddhism, begin to learn Buddhism, and just learn about the suffering, and without going further, they think that Buddhism is teaching the pessimistic teaching. Of course, if the Buddha only thought about suffering, only showed to the world about suffering, without going further, the Buddha's teaching is the pessimistic teaching. But the Buddha also showed us that this suffering has the cause. This suffering has the source. And the cause of the source of suffering is the tanha, is the craving. Yayang tanha punubhavika nandiraga sagata tatra tatra binandini. And because of the craving, accompanied by the delight and attachment, to find, to seek the pleasure here and there, that is the cause of suffering. So it means when we are just getting old, a mere old, that is not suffering. But if we have the craving not to get old, that is suffering. When we have, like, our hair becoming gray, it is not suffering. But if we wish, if we want, we crave that our hair should be all the time black, that is suffering. So the changing nature of the world, the mere impermanency is not suffering. But when we have the craving not to change, we try as much as possible to maintain what we feel like it is good, and then we don't want to get what actually unpleasant. We crave, we have this craving, so that is suffering. And in order to get rid of this suffering, especially the mental suffering, we have to eliminate, we have to destroy this very craving, this tanha. So when we are practicing meditation within and see within ourselves, and then we will understand, the more this craving disappear, and the more the peaceful mind is obtained. But the more this craving is developing, and the more the suffering is burdening, besetting us. So in order to get rid of this suffering, we need to eliminate this very craving. So therefore, it is Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, in the definitions of the cessation of suffering, the Buddha says, Tasayeva tanhaya asesa viraga nirodha cago padini sago muti analayo. With the cessation, abandonment without remaining, this very craving is the cessation of suffering. So this is our duty that we need in our daily life. When we are practicing the teachings of the Buddha, we make an effort how to get rid of this cause of suffering, how to eliminate this cause of suffering. And the Buddha, in the Four Noble Truths, especially the last truth, that is the way leading to the cessation of suffering, the Buddha has given the way. The Buddha has given the solution how to get rid of this suffering, how to get rid of this cause of suffering, that is the Noble Eightfold Path, as the way, as the path leading to the cessation of suffering. And this Noble Eightfold Path consisting, as I mentioned earlier, the right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right mindfulness, right effort, and right concentration. And ladies and gentlemen, this Noble Eightfold Path is the path that we need to practice in our daily life. We need to cultivate, we need to develop in our daily life. And this Noble Eightfold Path is not only the path leading to the cessation of suffering, but this same path, the very same path, is the path which leads to us to understand what suffering is. This is the path that leads us to eliminate the cause of suffering. And of course, that is the path that leading to the cessation of suffering. So this path that need to be practiced as the Buddhists, as who understand the teachings of the Buddha in our daily life. So what is the samadhi, the right view? That right view is none other than the understanding, the acceptance of these Four Noble Truths. So when we understand, when we accept, even though it is just theoretically, not direct experience, but when we understand these Four Noble Truths, that means our view is becoming right. Our view is becoming upright. We accept this tanha, this craving is the cause of suffering. We accept when this tanha is eliminated, the suffering is also eliminated. We accept this Noble Eightfold Path is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So this is the right view. So when we have the right view, of course, our intentions also becoming right, becoming sama sankappa. Our intentions are only intending, only leading our minds how to get rid of this suffering, how to get rid of this cause of suffering. So that is the sama sankappa, right intentions. So when these minds becoming right, intention becoming right, all what we speak, what we act, and our livelihood also becoming right. So we will have the sama vaca, sama kamanta, and also sama ajiva. And also, when our mind is right, our intention is right, all what we are doing is right, that is the right effort, sama vayama. Because with this right view, what we are doing in this very life, in the moment by moments, in the daily activities, is only how to get rid of this cause of suffering, to eliminate the defilements of mind as the cause of suffering, to develop the good things or the qualities that make us liberated, and we make effort in that, that is the right effort, samavayama. So when our life is led for these kinds of effort to eliminate the suffering, to eliminate the cause of suffering, so this is also right mindfulness. Because when we focus in our effort to eliminate the suffering, that means we focus within ourselves. We focus, we be mindful within ourselves to this mind and body. So being mindful to whatever things which process in our minds and body, this is the right mindfulness. So when we are practicing this and our mind becoming calm, our mind becoming serene, that is what we call as the sama samadhi, right concentration. So this Noble Eightfold Path is the way, is the path that lead to the cessation of suffering, and this very Noble Eightfold Path is the way of life as the Buddhist. So, ladies and gentlemen, in these very occasions, I would like to emphasize that now we as the human beings, not only just a human beings, but we are as the human Buddhists. Now we have the very fortunate time, because now we still have the chance, opportunity to listen to the Dhamma, to listen to the teachings of the Buddha, to listen these Four Noble Truths. So this is the time that we can make our effort, our best effort, how to try to understand these Four Noble Truths in order to get rid of this very suffering. So therefore, I would like to remind all of you, let our life in this, as the human being, as the human in the state of human, we have to use this very good opportunity to bring our minds to understand these Four Noble Truths, because we do not know, after we die, we do not know whether we will be reborn as a human or not. But in this very time, as a human, as the Buddhists, as the people who understand the teachings of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths, so we have to use our time as much as possible, as good as possible, to understand this Four Noble Truth for the benefits of ourselves and benefits of the Dhamma, benefits of all beings. So this is what I want to say to all of you, and thank you very much, and especially to the team who make this program is possible. And I hope we all be progressing in the teachings of the Buddha, and may all beings be happy. Sabbe sata bhavantu sukhitata. May all beings be happy. Thank you very much.